Hello, it's Monday, September 9th, and welcome to episode 357 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm NSI Senior Fellow Morgan Vina, and I'm joined today by Executive Director Jamil Jaffer and my fellow fellows Jessica Jones and Lester Munson. So today we're talking Iraq. On Friday, news outlets reported that the Biden administration and the government of Iraq have reached an understanding on plans for the withdrawal of U.S. coalition forces. While we don't have an announcement date just yet for when the 2,500 troops currently in Iraq will leave, leaks suggest that we would see hundreds depart by September 2025, with the rest departing by the end of 2026. However, sources also say that some of the troops could remain in an advisory capacity after that drawdown. Unclear as to just how many. While these talks were ongoing, we're seeing a Middle East that is getting hotter by the week. In fact, Reuters reported that the official announcement that was initially scheduled for a few weeks ago was actually postponed because of the regional escalation related to Israel's war in Gaza. So, Les, what do you make of this?
Morgan, it's I don't know if you're aware of this. It's about 2 months before a major U.S. election.
I didn't think she knew that. Hey, surprise, Morgan!
Really?
It's an election coming up.
You're welcome.
Seriously?
Newsflash.
Oh my God!
Newsflash. And I think what we're seeing here is pure politics. I don't think this is a serious policy proposal. I think this is an attempt by the administration to give Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, the Democrats' ticket, as much advantage as they can going into the election. They want to be able to say they're ending foreign wars. I see the skepticism on your faces, my friends. I'm going to tell you right now, this is generally popular with the American people. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying this is a good policy. I'm saying it's politically advantageous for them to be floating this idea right now. We're talking about first of all, no one's quoted as in these stories. These are anonymous sources talking about a policy change 2 years from now that will not happen. We have thousands of miles to go, many days to go, many weeks to go before any actual decisions are made here. This is an attempt by the White House to change the battlefield for Kamala Harris. You will say Americans don't vote based on foreign policy. Generally speaking, true. This is an election that's going to come down to about 1% in certain states. They're looking for micro advantages with the electorate in certain places. Michigan leaps to mind as a place where this might resonate pretty well for the Democratic ticket. I think that's what this is entirely about.
So there are a number of practical and larger foreign policy implications behind that theory, Les. Jamil, let's go to you. What can you respond to Lester's theory?
Well, look, I think a couple of things. One, look, the American people sometimes do vote on foreign policy. Clearly, Republicans are trying to tie Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to the Afghanistan withdrawal, which it's easy to tie them to it because they executed it in such a disastrous way. But you see that report coming out on Capitol Hill today. But the real story here is, if you're doing this for politics, why would you want to tie them to another withdrawal? I mean, that's ridiculous. This is a terrible thing. It's a terrible idea. One, as a policy matter. Number two, they're not even talking about the 900 troops we have in Syria. They're not talking about the hundreds or maybe even thousands of troops we have in the Kurdistan region, Erbil, and the like. This is the 2,500 troops in Iraq itself. These are people who have been being attacked by Iranian missile strikes over and over again. The Iraqis are going to have trouble as a result of this. That's what we should really be talking about. The politics of it, whatever. I mean, I don't think it's a win for the Biden administration, but they think it is, and Les thinks it is. I mean, maybe, but the real point is this is a disastrous foreign policy call. Whether the American people like having American troops in Iraq or not, the reality is they are important for our national security, and they should stay there. In fact, we should be doubling down there. And we should never have left Afghanistan. So, just because the American people have a point of view doesn't mean it's right. We need leadership that actually explains this to the American people, not leaders who are just like, you know what? It's politically convenient. Let's get the F out.
Yeah. So, Jess, what do we think about how this plays not only in the region, not only in Iraq itself, but with our regional partners in the Middle East, such as Israel, but also taking a step further and saying, okay, what message does this send to our adversaries, particularly Russia and China?
Yeah, to both, those questions and to Jamil and Les's point, if this is a political play, it's a terrible one. If anyone knows, President Biden knows what it's like to inherit foreign policy decisions that came from his predecessors. To put his now current VP in that place, that seems unwise, and especially, I mean, we're still having a congressional gold medal ceremony tomorrow honoring the 13 service members that were killed. So this is still part of the conversation. But to your point, Morgan, and Jamil touched lightly on it, we talk a lot here about the looming threat of Iran, right? And it can be from their support of the Houthis to Hezbollah to attacks on Israel. Iran continues to loom large, and we talk about effective deterrence here. And this withdrawal is the opposite of that. And that can be an unquoted, unnamed sources article, which is the height of ambiguity when it comes to our allies and when it comes to our adversaries. And, we've also discussed on the show the growing role of China in the Middle East and their want to be seen as a global power that can engage. And if we withdraw and if we disengage, that's just another opportunity for them to step in.
All right, Les. So clearly we have found some fault lines here. Care to respond?
Yeah, look, this is not a policy proposal. This is an attempt to influence the politics that the U.S. is going through right now.
So wait, let's just real quick. Are you saying they're not going to withdraw?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
It's fake.
3 years ago, Jamil, the Biden administration announced the end of the combat mission in Iraq and kind of hinted that it was the end of the U.S. presence there. It was not. They have done this before. They're going to do it again. Americans stationed abroad in a place like Iraq is not popular. Generally speaking, the U.S. intervention in Iraq is viewed negatively by the American people. They're going to be just fine with the U.S. pulling out. I'm not saying that's a good idea. I agree we should stay there. I agree this policy is bananas and doesn't make any sense for U.S. national interests. I totally agree. But politically, it makes sense. It helps Harris, particularly in places like Michigan and Pennsylvania, where Americans are like, hey, come back here and invest here. I don't understand why there are thousands of Americans stationed in a place like Iraq where it's not going very well.
You think they're not going to do it, right? I mean, so it doesn't matter. The policy's fine.
It doesn't even matter. They don't have a plan to actually do it. It's going to be the next administration that will make the decision.
That looks good on the world stage. Let's say we're going to withdraw, but let's not do it. It's not a real statement.
He's not making any decisions here. This is a pure float of an idea to impact the election that is just a few weeks away.
So we've been negotiating with the government of Iraq
for months.
For months.
We've been negotiating with them for years. About the U.S. presence there. Yes, ISIS is making a bit of a resurgence. It would be crazy to pull U.S. troops out of there.
U.S. forces are also being attacked regularly.
There's a huge NATO training mission in Iraq right now. We're not even talking about that. This is a balloon float to see if it plays well for Harris, and if it does, maybe they'll double down on it a little bit, and then we can condemn them for doing it. I'd be happy to join in that. But let's see this for what it is. This is a political play.
Okay. Well, that's a wrap. Thanks so much to Devlin Burney, Claude Jennings, and the NSI staff for their help in producing today's episode. Join us again on Wednesday, September 11th, for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you smart, fast, on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. Fault Lines is now on YouTube, so check out our smiling faces for a video of today's episode. If you like what you heard or saw, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.